All right, welcome to the second phase of the Industrial Revolution computer side chat. For this one, we'll talk about how the second phase differs from the first. We'll also talk about how the evolution of power and the long-term effects of the Industrial Revolution, both positive and negative.
Let's do a quick recap of the first phase of the IR, the first Industrial Revolution. A lot of things were power-driven by water. On the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. That's why I have the picture in the bottom left. And then it was the steam engine, and the steam and the fire was caused by wood, and then eventually that's replaced by coal. They were running out of wood, and coal can burn more efficiently, higher temperatures, although there is pollution with coal, but England did have an abundance of it. So everything is going to be kind of driven by coal moving forward with the first phase of the Industrial Revolution. And don't forget that the textile industry is the dominant industry during the first phase. Now, the second phase of the Industrial Revolution, this is going to look, a little more relatable. Power is driven by electricity. That's why I have the picture in the bottom left. So this is where Edison comes into play. And oil. And it says petroleum, but I have the oil barrels, so you understand that we might even still be in the second phase of the Industrial Revolution. But these are the power sources. And I think overall with the second phase of the Industrial Revolution, they're just trying to produce as much steel as possible. And that's why I have the picture on the bottom right. And steel is kind of what most of our skyscrapers are made out of.
All right, so now we'll start with the pros, and Yoda tells us to think positive, you must. So the leisure activities that came in or that fall under the pros category are the introduction of sports teams and how we think of modern day sports. Vacations, people had more time on their hands, so they were able to go on vacation. So we've got an image here of my wife and I on our honeymoon when we were snorkeling with whale sharks. And then
we were in San Francisco after a hike.
And then the next pro that we'll highlight here is how the government reacts to the government reactions. The working conditions, so the government begins to put laws in place that prohibit factories from doing certain things, like having kids under the age of 8 work, and then the number of hours people could work and so forth. So you can see this chart in the resources if you're looking for some more specifics. The next pro that we have is the introduction of schools, and it starts with elementary school kids, and then it gradually works its way up to the high school, the creation of high schools. Workers gain more rights through the use of collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is when the workers come together. So together we bargain. So the workers come together to bargain versus beforehand when each person was trying to take care of their own pay and how they were treated individually. They weren't able to get very far. They weren't able to be very successful. So they come together in unions and demand or negotiate with the owners. So the workers negotiate with the owners on pay, working condition, and so forth. And that started during the Industrial Revolution, towards the tail end of it.
Just real quick on this slide, sports, vacation, education. After listening to some of your Identity Day speeches, boy, does this slide and the benefits of the Industrial Revolution really apply to you, because you guys were mentioning these things.
Pros continued. We have a lot of medical advancements, so the use of vaccines, such as like the chloria vaccine, so people don't get that anymore. We have X-rays that were invented during this time period, blood transfusions that a lot of people still get. Like my father has to get blood transfusions a lot of times before his treatment, so he has the right white blood counts. Aspirin, I'm pretty sure we've all taken that for a headache at some point. And then anesthesia, so if you've ever had surgery and they've put you to sleep beforehand, we can thank the Industrial Revolution for that, so we don't feel the pain and we're able to sleep through it.
And I think any advancement in medicine today could be traced back to one of these things almost.
Yeah, absolutely. MRIs trace back to X-rays and so on.
All right, so here we have the cons, and of course, there's the Jordan cry face that's so popular in memes today. All right, negative impacts. Well, government control. Now the government has come in and set working conditions and minimum wage and all these things. They now have a power to tell us, kind of, especially if we're business owners, what to do. So that could be a negative. Urbanization. This process is not stopped, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. And we're going to get into a little more of that on Wednesday. And let's not forget about the slums, which is the picture I included on the top here, because that is an effect. It's not every city you see is as beautiful as the one on the bottom. The environment, especially with what I mentioned, coal, we're going to start hurting our environment a lot more because of our uses of power or how we gather it. Imperialism, which we're going to talk about in the next slide with Mr. Armstrong. Countries are exhausting their natural resources, and they're going to other countries, and they're going to basically rob theirs. And that's what we'll talk about in a lot of detail in January. But first off, we're going to hear from Mr. Armstrong.
So one of the first causes of the Industrial Revolution, one of the first ways the Industrial Revolution influenced imperialism was the need for more raw materials. So here you see the raw materials that were in existence in Africa, and places like Britain began to go down there and colonize, so create colonies where they were able to get access to these things. The next one we've got is unregulated cheap labor. So the government was putting into place some regulations to prevent child labor and so forth in Britain and some of the industrialized countries. The non-industrialized countries have not done that, and a lot of them still haven't, which is why a lot of modern day companies will have their factories in those countries today, because they're able to pay less and make more profit, or sell the product to you at a cheaper rate, whichever one you think they're really trying to do. And then the last one we have is the need for a new market. So I have this image here because iPhones are pretty much available everywhere in the world. So if iPhone was able to crack into a new market of the alien world, so able to sell iPhones to aliens, it would be the first time that they'd ever seen them. And that is an example of looking for a new market to sell your product.
And I think during this time, there's a ton of places in underdeveloped countries that have never seen the finished product of textiles that England is producing.
All right, now to the last slide.
Yep. Women during the Industrial Revolution, what kind of part did they play? And a very important part. Remember, during phase one, they had really tough working conditions. You read about those in the primary source document activity. Although that it was all pretty much negative, there is a positive. It was an opportunity to work alongside men and prove that they are equal, and it really gave the feminist movement the momentum it needed, because during phase two of the Industrial Revolution, countries started to grant equality, and the first one to do it was New Zealand in 1893. I've included the picture of Rosie the River, very famous from World War II, that I guess emphasizes women equality, but I think it's more of the the Industrial Revolution that provided the opportunities to get to where women are today in terms of equality. So very important. I didn't want to forget about that.
Thank you. We'll see you next year.